So the pageant world to me is something that it was an interesting season of life. It was nothing that I was ever groomed for. It was nothing that was ever on my radar.
We didn't have the opportunities to do certain things because we were so caught up thinking, okay, after Miss USA, we'll move to LA and we'll become, famous because our agent is going to book us for XYZ and then we'll somehow get on a reality TV show.
I was living in China and doing a lot of work with the victims from trafficking, work with a orphanage in Romania.
Erika Kirk is catching serious heat again. And this time, it's about her past in the Miss USA world. What she once brushed off as something random is now being questioned after older photos and timelines started surfacing. Turns out Erika was already deep in the pageant scene back in 2009, even appearing on stage alongside Lindsay Halligan. That detail alone has people raising eyebrows, especially now that both names are being talked about in a much bigger context. Fast forward to today, and people are pointing out how certain connections seem to keep circling back. Erika recently landed a position on the U.S. Air Force Academy Board, and critics are questioning how that happened given her background. The conversation online is getting louder, with many asking how pageant ties and networking might play a bigger role than people thought. And that's where things start to feel even more layered. Some are now revisiting Erika's relationship timeline with Charlie, suggesting that their connection may not have been as spontaneous as it once seemed. Old details, timelines, and overlapping stories are being re-examined, and people are starting to question how everything actually came together. There's also been growing chatter about Erika's past appearances, international travel, and the circles she moved in before becoming widely known. From charity work overseas to connections that span multiple countries, her background is now under a microscope like never before. At the same time, discussions online are bringing up various claims and theories. But it's important to note that many of these points remain unverified.
Bronze 23, Arizona.
Erika was once mistaken for Cameron Diaz, which led to an invitation aboard a luxurious yacht. Sadly, she was booted when they realized it wasn't Cameron Diaz. You're not on a yacht when you're Arizona.
And are being debated heavily. Still, the sheer number of questions being raised has kept the situation trending and difficult to ignore. What really has people talking is how Erika previously described her pageant entry as something casual, saying she joined after receiving something in the mail. But now, with older footage and documented appearances coming to light, that version of events is being challenged hard. And the more these details stack up, the more people are starting to wonder if the full story has ever really been told. Erika also went on record, claiming that the 2012 Miss Arizona competition was her very first step into the pageant world. Sounds neat and simple, right? But that version is now getting challenged in a big way after new images started making rounds online. Because now, there's a resurfaced photo from the 2010 Miss Colorado USA event, which actually took place in late 2009. And in that lineup, people quickly spotted Erika standing there in a blue dress, clearly already involved in pageants years before what she originally claimed. And she wasn't alone either. Right there in the same lineup on the other side was Lindsay Halligan. That detail has people doing a double take, especially considering where both of their paths eventually led. Fast forward to recent years, and Lindsay stepped into a major legal role, though her appointment later faced legal challenges and didn't hold up in court. Still, the overlap between these two women's early pageant days and their later presence around public institutions has people asking a lot of questions. Some online are even pointing out how unusual it seems that two contestants from the same pageant stage ended up moving in high-level circles at the same time.
Pageants, or when did that come about?
Right. So the pageant world to me is something that it was an interesting season of life. It was nothing that I was ever groomed for. It was nothing that was ever on my radar. I wanted to play professional basketball.
Tomboy.
That was my thing. I remember getting something in the mail when I had come home from school one summer, and it was like, hey, you should compete at Miss Arizona USA. Someone nominated you. And I was like, I don't know who would nominate me for that, but okay. So the pageant world for me was something that was not a form of narcissism. It was more along the terms of being a steward for my state, especially as it hit our 100th year celebration.
Whether coincidence or just strong networking, that connection is now getting picked apart from every angle. It doesn't stop there either. People have noticed that Erika and Lindsay are close in age and both attended the same private college in Colorado, Regis University. That shared background is now being added into the bigger conversation about how their paths may have crossed more than once over the years. There's also discussion around Erika's later move into real estate back in 2018, where she joined a well-known firm despite having limited prior experience. In that field, that company has appeared in publicly discussed records connected to Epstein-related investigations, which has added even more curiosity around the situation. To be clear, these connections are being talked about online and remain part of ongoing public discussion, not confirmed conclusions. But with old photos, timelines, and career moves all lining up in unexpected ways, people are continuing to dig deeper and question how everything connects. And as more details surface, that original claim about her first pageant experience is looking harder and harder for some people to accept at face value. Lehman, who was leading the Corcoran Group at the time Erika worked there, is another name that appears in publicly discussed records connected to Epstein-related investigations.
Trump loves a beauty pageant. And by his own admission, he was no stranger backstage while owning parts of 3 different pageants for nearly 2 decades.
They're standing there with no clue. Is everybody okay? And you see these incredible looking women. And so I sort of get away with things like
that. Detail has added even more attention to Erika's timeline, especially as people continue digging into her past roles and connections. Now the focus shifts back to her pageant years, and this is where things really start heating up. Candace Owens recently spoke on the situation and claimed that Erika's timeline doesn't fully line up with what's been presented before. According to her, Erika had long-standing ambitions of becoming well-known, and that drive may have influenced many of her early decisions. Candace also brought attention to Erika's upbringing, mentioning that her mother, Lori France, played a strong role in guiding her into the pageant world. It's also been noted that Lori had a background in modeling herself, which could explain how Erika got introduced to that environment so early. Then things got even more interesting when an older interview with Erika resurfaced. In that clip, Erika openly talked about wanting to be in the spotlight and even shared her dream of becoming a Hollywood actress. That part is now being widely circulated because it lines up closely with what Candace was describing. And now people are re-examining Erika's relationship with Charlie from a completely different angle. Some are questioning whether their connection was purely organic, especially given how different their backgrounds were at the time. Charlie was younger and had openly said he didn't have much dating experience before meeting Erika. On the other hand, Erika had already been active in social and professional circles, which has led some online to speculate about how their paths crossed and how quickly things developed. Observers are pointing out that she seemed comfortable navigating high-profile environments, while Charlie was still adjusting to that level of attention. There's also discussion about the type of people Erika was previously associated with some claiming she tended to move within well-connected circles.
From the very beginning, her mother is definitely the person who pushed that. I actually do believe that Erika loves basketball. There's no question she plays basketball. But this idea that she didn't want it is just not true. It's so objectively not true. Erika, without question, and anybody who's being objective and honest and looking at her history of the people that she dated and the people that she wanted to be in close proximity to, can guarantee to you that this girl wanted to be famous, like very badly wanted to be famous one way or the other. And one of her exes was very clear. He said to me, I was warned by another person in beauty pageant world that girl will do anything to get to the top and her mother will do anything.
While these claims remain part of online conversation and not confirmed facts, they continue to fuel curiosity about her past relationships and networking patterns. Because when you line up the timeline, people start asking questions about how everything unfolded. Charlie was a rising public figure at a young age, focused heavily on his work and still figuring out his personal life. Then suddenly, someone with experience in public-facing roles enters the picture, and their relationship moves quickly from there. At the same time, individuals around Charlie were reportedly giving their opinions on the situation, with some suggesting that Erika stood out significantly in comparison to his previous experiences. Whether that influenced anything or not remains unclear, but it's another layer people are now analyzing. And the more these details get revisited, the more this story continues to spark debate, with many trying to piece together what was coincidence, what was timing, and what might still be missing from the full picture. When you start putting all these pieces together, the timeline begins to look less random and way more structured than people first thought. It's not just one detail or one moment anymore. It's a sequence of events that keeps lining up in a way that has people seriously questioning how everything unfolded. Because here's where things really take a turn.
At one point, so that hunger for Erika to get to the top, there is a connection just based on discussions I have had with multiple people to her mother. Erika is, without question, a climber. Okay. She is also, without question, willing to lie to make her mother look better. I mean, to say I grew up with a single mother is not true. So why is she saying it? Well, people suspect probably Lori is the person in her ear getting her to say that because it makes Lori look good. She wanted Erika to be famous, but let's not remove Erika from this. Erika desperately wanted to be famous.
The story of how Erika and Charlie first met has never stayed consistent, and that alone has become a major talking point. In one version, it was described as a simple, natural meeting, something casual that just happened. But then in another telling, the setting, the timing, and even the circumstances start shifting. At one point, it was said they met through mutual connections. In another version, it sounded more like a chance encounter during travel. Then there's also a version where it was framed almost like a professional meeting that turned personal. And when you stack those versions side by side, they don't fully match up. That's what's making people pause, because when origin stories keep changing, it raises questions about what the real version actually is, and more. Importantly, why it hasn't stayed consistent from the start. Now add that to everything else already being discussed: the early pageant involvement, the connections to influential circles, the fast rise into high-level spaces, and the timing of her relationship with Charlie. When all of that overlaps, people begin to look at the situation from a completely different perspective. There's also been growing attention on Erika's international travel history and the people she reportedly met along the way. Trips that once seemed routine are now being re-examined, especially when placed next to the timeline of her personal and professional moves. And again, none of this is being presented as confirmed conclusions. These are conversations happening publicly, with people analyzing patterns and trying to understand how all these pieces connect. But the consistency of those patterns...
Who was Miss North Carolina 2012, and we competed together. And it's so funny because we always laugh about how right after the pageant, it's one of those things where the pageant excels you, but also really holds you back. Like, we didn't have the opportunity to do internships like other people because we were too busy preparing for Miss USA. We didn't have the opportunities to do certain things because we were so caught up thinking, okay, after Miss USA, we'll move to LA and we'll become, famous because our agent is going to book us for XYZ, and then we'll somehow get on a reality TV show.
Is what keeps pulling more attention. Then there's the shift that happened later in Charlie's life. People who followed him closely noticed changes in his tone, his focus, and even the way he carried himself publicly. Some believe it was just the pressure of being in the spotlight. Others think it reflects something more personal happening behind the scenes. Because when someone goes from being fully in control of their path to appearing more reserved or different over time, it doesn't go unnoticed. And those subtle shifts are now being revisited alongside everything else. At the same time, Erika's role seemed to grow more visible. From being known primarily through pageants and appearances, she gradually became more connected to larger platforms and responsibilities. And that transition is now being looked at much more closely. People are also pointing out how quickly certain opportunities appeared. Positions, access, and influence that usually take years to build seem to happen in a shorter window. That doesn't automatically mean anything unusual, but it does add to the list of questions people are asking. And then there's the way criticism has been handled. Every time new claims or discussions surface, the response has often been strong and immediate. That approach has only made the situation more visible, because attempts to shut things down tend to bring even more attention. Meanwhile, those following the story aren't just looking at one claim anymore. They're comparing interviews, reviewing timelines, revisiting old footage, and connecting details that were once overlooked. It's like a puzzle where more pieces keep appearing.
Pull off an event of a century. It's just insane. We had over 275,000 people that attended, and a stadium overflow. We're at over 200,000 for merch sales. Don't quote me on that because I think it just keeps bumping up like crazy.
And every new piece changes how the whole picture looks. Even smaller details are now being analyzed. The way certain events were described, the timing of key decisions, the people involved at different stages. None of it is being ignored anymore. And that level of scrutiny is making it harder for anything to go unnoticed. And as this continues to build, one thing is becoming clear. The public isn't satisfied with surface-level explanations anymore. People want clarity, they want consistency, and they want answers that actually line up across the board. Because when stories shift, timelines overlap, and connections keep appearing, it naturally leads to more curiosity. And that curiosity isn't slowing down anytime soon. Right now, everything is still unfolding in real time. New discussions are popping up, more details are being revisited, and the conversation keeps evolving. Whether this all turns out to be coincidence, misunderstanding, or something more layered, one thing is certain: people are paying closer attention than ever before. And they're not just watching what's being said now. They're going back, rechecking everything, and asking questions that weren't being asked before. And until those questions are clearly addressed, this situation isn't going anywhere. It's only getting bigger, louder, and more impossible to ignore. It didn't take long for Charlie to get pulled into that relationship, and now people are looking back at how fast everything moved with a completely different mindset. At the time, it may have seemed like a natural connection, but with everything that's come out, some are questioning whether there was more going on behind the scenes. Because right after they got married, Erika's public image noticeably shifted. She leaned into a completely different lifestyle presentation, one that felt very intentional and carefully crafted. And now, with everything that's happened, people are pointing out how different things seem compared to back then. Then came the turning point that changed everything. After Charlie passed under tragic circumstances, the timeline of what followed raised a lot of eyebrows. Within just over a week, Erika stepped into a major leadership role, taking control of a large and influential organization. Supporters say this was planned ahead of time and that Charlie trusted her to carry things forward if anything ever happened. But critics are questioning how realistic that scenario actually is. They're asking whether someone with her background would typically be prepared to take over something that big so quickly. That's where the debate really intensifies. Some believe it was simply a matter of trust and internal planning, while others feel like the transition happened too fast and too smoothly to ignore. The speed of it all has become one of the biggest talking points in this entire situation. And then there's the reaction that followed. Moments that were meant to be serious and respectful are now being re-examined after certain clips and audio started circulating online. In those moments, people claim Erika appeared more focused on logistics and public engagement than expected, which has only added to the controversy. Of course, it's important to remember that grief looks different for everyone, and public figures are often under intense pressure during difficult times. But that hasn't stopped people from analyzing every detail, especially when emotions, timing, and messaging don't seem to fully align in their eyes. So now the conversation has shifted from just what happened to how everything was handled afterward. People are comparing timelines, reviewing statements, and asking whether this was all coincidence or part of a much bigger chain of events. And that's where things stand right now. A situation filled with questions, mixed interpretations, and a growing audience trying to figure out what's real and what isn't. Now, I want to hear what you think. Do you see this as a series of coincidences, or does it feel like something more structured? Drop your thoughts in the comments, make sure to like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you in the next one.